The office refrigerator was leaking again. Of course it was. We had a client presentation in 6 hours that could make or break the entire account, and I was ankle-deep in puddled soda and someone's rotting lunch from February. I muttered something about organizational failure and kicked the door shut, soaking the hem of my slacks. That was where my life at Vanguard Consulting Group seemed to play out. Between late-night spreadsheets and 5 in the morning slide edits. Between cleaning up everyone else's mess and hoping someone would one day notice. Not with applause, but maybe a simple thank you or a functional break room. I wiped my hands on a paper towel and limped back to my desk, which was really just a folding table someone once dragged out of storage when they ran out of real desks for the contract hires. My laptop buzzed with Slack pings, client document revision requests, an internal thread where Cody Higgins, the golden retriever in a custom suit, had just asked if we had data for slide 7. I had built the entire routing dashboard from scratch, rebuilt it after Cody presented the wrong version last week, then debugged the client's procurement dashboard myself because it was swamped. I had stayed late enough last month to set off the motion alarms 3 times. So, yes, I was tired, but this presentation mattered. Apex Solutions was on the edge of canceling 6 months ago. I had kept them on the hook with hours of troubleshoot support and a proprietary spreadsheet routing engine I wrote in one fever dream weekend at my kitchen table. This was the moment. This was the win. Anyway, back to the flood. I pulled up the final version of the slide deck, my 10th. It was clean. Streamlined visuals packed with metrics the client chief operating officer could eat with a spoon. I triple-checked the embedded dashboard links, hit save, and emailed it to myself as backup and to my personal drive just in case. Because when you have been burned in this industry as many times as I have, you learn to carry a digital fire extinguisher. I did not hear when someone wheeled in another standing desk across the hall for Cody again, or when the intern knocked over a stack of mailing labels. I was too deep in it, tuning numbers, timing transitions, and polishing lines that other people would read like they had written them themselves. I was not bitter. Well, maybe a little, but that bitterness had sharp edges. It kept me moving. At 11:37 in the morning, I checked my calendar to confirm the demo time. 3:30 in the afternoon sharp. The client chief operating officer, Julian Fletcher, would be there, plus the senior operations leads. I had requested 20 minutes up front to walk them through my diagnostic, my baby. 6 months of midnight oil and soul erosion in a single presentation. Then the calendar notification updated. The title changed, Apex Demo Prep 3:30. Attendees, Brandon Cobb, Julian Fletcher, Cody Higgins. My name was gone. I blinked, hit refresh, checked again. Still gone. Slack pinged. New message from Brandon Cobb, the project manager who once called me a logistics wizard and then forgot to invite me to his wedding. He wrote that they thought it would be more efficient if Cody ran point for the demo, since I had done so much already. 10 seconds later, a second message from Brandon, not meant for me, popped up. The subject read demo strategy, and the message was simple. He will eat it, he always does. And just like that, the air left the room. I stared at the screen like it owed me money. I reread that message 5 times slowly, not because I did not get it, but because I did. This was not an oversight. This was a setup. They were icing me out. The deck I wrote, Cody would present it. The work I had done, he would get the glory and the commission and the next big account. He will eat it. He always does. Not this time. I did not stand up, did not flip the table, or march down the hallway like some vengeful office banshee. I simply leaned back, cracked my knuckles, and stared out the window at the cheap skyline. There are 2 types of people in this corporate circus, the ones who play the game and the ones who build the board. And I had just decided I was done building for free. I did not move for a full minute, just sat there like my bones were buffering. The Slack notification blinked stupidly on my screen as if begging me to react. Maybe it expected a thumbs up emoji or a polite note saying no worries. But I was not that guy anymore. My jaw twitched. I reached for my coffee mug, realized it was cold, and set it down with a dull thud. In the glass wall across from me, I caught my reflection. A 55-year-old analyst with graying hair and tired eyes. The man who pulled triple coverage when 2 analysts quit mid-quarter. The man who trained Cody when he could not differentiate between net margin and net worth. The man who, until 3 minutes ago, Thought he had earned this moment. Eat it, I whispered. My inbox dinged again. Brandon Cobb wanted me to polish the deck one last time and send the final version tonight. Told Cody you would help him with the talking points, he wrote. Appreciate you. I did not scream. I did not cry. But something fractured quietly like drywall behind cheap paint. I clicked open the deck. My deck. I spent 5 seconds staring at the front slide, Logistics Reimagined, my title, my font, my phrasing. I hovered over the file name and hit the save option. The new title was Logistics Final. Cody Sucks. I scrolled down to the data visualizations in the presentation, smoothing out a trend line that Cody had stretched into oblivion. I fixed a mislabeled axis, deleted his animated graphic of a rocket taking off, and streamlined the layout. If I was going to be cut out of the meeting, I was at least going to hand him something he could not butcher in real time. Because while my blood was boiling, my pride did not negotiate. I was not about to let this kid tank 6 months of my reputation with a single fumbled video call. Then came the real kicker, a message from HR business partner, Dana, wanting an alignment chat tomorrow. This was a slow, polite firing in reverse. The signs were clear. My time off approval took 3 weeks. My work was duplicated without credit, and my name disappeared from invites. I looked at Cody's Slack avatar, open-mouthed mid-law. He was the nephew of our chief operating officer, Walter Higgins, with no real experience, and now he was presenting my work. They did not even hide it, because they knew I would stay silent and eat it. I stood up slowly, walked to the window by the break room, and watched the gray clouds roll across the skyline. Then I smiled, not the brittle smile I used on video calls, but a real one, thin and sharp. I walked back to my desk, opened a new browser tab, and looked at a name, Julian Fletcher, the client chief operating officer. I had spent weeks coaching him through his own team's technical issues. We had done after-hours troubleshooting on his broken operations dashboard while he muttered about wanting to replace his entire development department. We respected each other. He would want to know. I clicked on his direct number. I did not dial, not yet. I just stared at it like a loaded weapon. Something had snapped, but not the kind that breaks you, the kind that frees you. I decided one thing with cold, absolute clarity. They would regret forgetting whose fingerprints were on every win they claimed. I uploaded the final deck with quiet precision. The file was flawless. I had polished Cody's sloppy phrasing, trimmed the flab, and realigned every timeline bar. I even added speaker notes that would make a novice sound seasoned. A Trojan horse to mask the fact that Cody did not know his earnings before interest and taxes from his elbow. They assumed I was playing the team player. Cody did not even thank me. He just sent a thumbs-up emoji. I did not reply. They thought I was backing down, but I was quietly gutting the house from inside. I opened my personal notes and wrote down a single line. Client has no idea I have been removed. Might want to fix that. Then another line. Start packing. It was not an emotional spiral. It was strategic planning. I had built this system slide by slide, weekend by weekend. I would be damned if Cody and his soft-jawed nepotism were going to waltz in and hand it off like a cheap trophy. I leaned back and stared at my reflection in the dark monitor. I did not look angry. I looked ready. I remembered late October, when a client deliverable collapsed 12 hours before the deadline. I was 3 days into a fever, running on cold medicine. Everyone else went home. Brandon Cobb suggested delaying, but I stayed up until 4:30 in the morning fixing it. Brandon took a victory lap on Monday, or December when I covered emails during Christmas week so others could unplug. Or March, when Julian Fletcher called me after hours because his systems were failing under load. I spent 4 hours walking him through corrections. He said I was the only reason they stayed. Now I was being replaced like an expired printer cartridge. I clicked open LinkedIn. I went to Julian Fletcher's profile, read his recent activity, and saw a post he had made last week about seeking fresh external strategy insights. I smiled. The door was not just cracked, it was already open. My Slack pinged. Cody wanted to hop on a quick call to walk him through the metrics. I typed that I could not tonight, was busy, and closed the application. No explanations, no rescue missions, no more enabling the downfall of my own career. They wanted the deck, they got it. They wanted my silence, that ship had sailed. They wanted my loyalty, but that invoice was due, and the interest rate had just gone predatory. I stood, walked to the bathroom, and stared at myself in the mirror. This time, I looked done. Done apologizing, done fixing what other people broke, done pretending it was all fine just to make fragile men feel like leaders. I washed my hands slowly, dried them, walked back to my desk, opened my email, and typed a short message to the client chief operating officer. "Are you free for a quick call?" The match was struck. Now all that remained was watching the house burn. The call lasted 7 minutes. That was all it took to end 6 months of corporate choreography and start something sharper, quieter, and final. I dialed Julian Fletcher's direct line with the same calm I used to fix a broken pivot table. Not angry, not desperate, just certain. He answered on the second ring. He asked if everything was okay with the presentation. I told him that was why I was calling, that there had been a change in my involvement, and that I was removed from the project this morning due to an internal reshuffle. I explained he would be meeting with Cody Higgins now. There was a long pause. Julian sighed, muttering about Cody, whom he remembered as the guy who thought an application programming interface was a new vitamin. He asked if I was kidding, and said the team at Vanguard had lied to him, claiming I was on a special assignment. I stayed quiet. Then Julian asked, in a lower voice, if I was calling to complain. I told him no, I do not complain. I build systems that do not collapse during board meetings. Julian laughed, a dry sound. He asked if I still had access to my deliverables, and I confirmed that everything was mine. That was when I stepped across the line they had drawn for me. I told him we already had a strong working relationship, and I knew his operations back-end better than his own team. I proposed stepping in as an independent consultant. I would provide continuity, clean terms, and no drama. Julian did not flinch. He asked for my rate. I told him my fee was 20% of the projected operational savings, which would amount to a fixed rate of $42,800 for the first phase. He agreed instantly. Within 5 minutes, the non-disclosure agreement was in my inbox. The consulting agreement followed 5 minutes after that. By the time I clicked sign, my entire career had pivoted, but there was a legal shield I had to establish first. I needed to ensure Vanguard could not claim ownership of the routing dashboard I had built. Over the weekend, I reviewed my personal files. I had written the core algorithm of the optimization engine on my personal laptop, using my own software licenses, months before I signed Vanguard's standard intellectual property assignment agreement. The agreement only covered work created during employment hours or using company resources. Because the engine was an original work of authorship created outside the scope of my employment, I held the exclusive copyright under Title 17 of the United States Code, Section 106. I had registered the copyright under my own name. I spent 5 years of my spare time building and perfecting this algorithm, long before Vanguard even hired me. It was my proprietary code, protected by federal copyright law. Vanguard had merely been granted an implied license to use it internally, but they had absolutely no rights to resell or license it to third parties. By attempting to package it as part of their pitch to Apex, they were crossing a major legal boundary. My letter made it clear that any unauthorized commercial exploitation of my copyrighted engine would result in an immediate injunction. Vanguard's legal team knew they had no leg to stand on. Vanguard's plan to license this dashboard to Apex Solutions as their own proprietary technology was a direct infringement of my exclusive rights under Section 106. I drafted a formal letter explaining this, citing the statute, and sent it to Vanguard's legal department, copied to Julian. I explained that Vanguard had no right to distribute, modify, or display my proprietary code. If they attempted to use it during the presentation, it would constitute willful copyright infringement. Julian saw the letter and immediately understood. He realized Vanguard had no legal right to the solution they were trying to sell him. The only way Apex could legally use the dashboard was by licensing it directly from me. This legal weapon changed everything. It was a clean, undeniable checkmate. Vanguard's legal department panicked, but they had no defense. The code was mine, the copyright was registered, and the timeline of creation was documented on my personal drive. They could not touch me without triggering a federal lawsuit that would destroy their relationship with Apex. On Monday morning, I stood up from my desk, gathered my personal laptop, a small spider plant, and my favorite coffee mug. I looked around the office one last time. Simon was at the printer looking nervous. I caught his eye and gave him a brief nod. He did not know yet, but I would make sure he was taken care of once I established my own consultancy. I placed my notebook into my leather bag, slid my laptop into its sleeve, and picked up the small spider plant that had sat on my desk for 5 years. I walked out without saying a word to Brandon, who was busy practicing his opening remarks in front of a mirror. I took the stairs, my dress shoes echoing against the concrete stairwell with a steady, rhythmic thud. Every floor I passed was a memory of late nights, missed promotions, and HR telling me to be less intimidating. All of it was behind me now. I walked out into the summer air. Outside the sun was bright. Somewhere upstairs, people who did not know they had just lost their best strategist were preparing for a presentation that was already dead. I pulled out my phone, blocked 3 numbers, and deleted my work email. I opened my new personal inbox. A message was waiting. Client consulting agreement signed. Welcome aboard. I smiled and turned the corner without looking back. Cody Higgins was 2 slides into a rambling metaphor about supply chains as jazz bands when the door opened. I stepped inside the conference room like I owned the oxygen. I wore clean black slacks, a dark blazer, and a neutral expression, carrying a leather folio under my arm. Every head in the room turned. Cody froze mid-sentence, his laser pointer trembling on the screen. He blinked as if I were a hallucination. The room was lined with Vanguard's senior executives, including Brandon Cobb and the Chief Operating Officer, Walter Higgins. They had flown in to witness their Golden Boy's big victory. The conference room at Apex Solutions was large, with floor-to-ceiling windows looking out over the harbor. Julian Fletcher sat at the center of the table, flanked by his operations leads and their chief financial officer. On the other side sat Vanguard's representatives, looking like they had already won a championship. Brandon Cobb had a smug grin, while Walter Higgins sat nodding approvingly at his nephew. Cody was sweating through his collar, trying to sound authoritative while reading from the slides I had built. When I walked in, the temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. Brandon's grin froze, and he sat up so fast he almost spilled his coffee. Walter Higgins frowned, his eyebrows knitting together in confusion. They had assumed I was at home, eating the demotion as I always did. Brandon stood up, looking like a man who had just caught his dog chewing the rug. He asked what I was doing here. Before he could finish, Julian Fletcher spoke up, smooth and final. He announced that I was with them now, serving as Apex's new independent consultant. Julian smiled, adding that since they were overhauling operations, they wanted to go straight to the source. The air left the room. I took my seat beside Julian, opened my folio, and clicked my pen. Business as usual. Cody laughed nervously, a sound short of a breakdown. He stammered that Vanguard was presenting their solution. Julian leaned back, folded his arms, and stated that I had built 80% of the solution, so they were simply cutting out the middleman. Brandon's face drained of color. He opened his mouth, closed it, and sat back down. Walter Higgins looked at Brandon, then at Julian, his face turning a dark shade of red. He tried to intervene, stating that Vanguard had a proprietary contract, and that any work I did belonged to them. Julian did not even look at Walter. He simply gestured to the folder in front of him. Julian stated that their legal counsel had already reviewed the copyright registration for the core routing algorithm, and it was clear that Dennis Vance owned the intellectual property. He added that Vanguard had no rights to license it. Walter's mouth opened, but no sound came out. The legal checkmate had landed before the first slide was finished. I did not say a word. My presence was the statement. Cody's hand shook as he clicked to the next slide. It was one of mine, filled with clean lines and sharp numbers. He began reading the bullet points like a schoolboy reciting a book report. 5 sentences in, he misread a critical acronym. I corrected him gently, without any edge in my voice. I explained that the acronym stood for on-time delivery, not order dispatch. Cody blinked, nodded, and corrected himself. Brandon shifted uncomfortably. I turned a page in my notebook. 2 slides later, Cody stumbled again on a metric. I pointed out that the margin delta reflected last quarter's fuel surcharge rollback, not customer churn. Julian chimed in, noting that the detail was clearly written in my side notes, and asked Cody if he had read them. Cody's collar was dark with sweat. Walter Higgins, who had been silent, leaned forward and whispered something to Brandon. Brandon looked physically ill. I watched this from the corner of my eye and noted it like data. The presentation was a slow-motion train wreck. Cody had spent his time practicing his jazz band metaphors rather than learning the actual operations data. He did not understand the difference between operating expenses and capital expenditure, and when the Apex CFO asked a question about integration timelines, Cody looked like he had been asked to solve quantum physics. He stammered, looking at Brandon for help. Brandon tried to speak, but Julian raised a hand, silencing him. He wanted to see if the presenter actually knew the material. Cody could not answer. It was a clear demonstration of the cost of nepotism. Halfway through the meeting, Cody tried to explain the cross-platform integration I had designed. He butchered it, calling it a basic plugin, and then trailed off. Julian sighed. He turned to me and asked if I would mind jumping in. I did not flinch. I adjusted the screen and launched into a 3-minute, bulletproof breakdown of the system. I explained the logic, the strategy, and the implementation pathway. The Apex team nodded, and the chief financial officer scribbled notes. Cody looked like someone had set fire to his resume. When I finished, I closed my folio and leaned back, returning to my silence. The room had shifted completely. Vanguard's executives were trying to salvage the wreckage. Brandon opened his mouth to speak, but Julian stood up. He thanked Vanguard for their time, but stated they would be reviewing proposals from other vendors next week. For now, he said, I would be coordinating the transition. I stood, shook hands with the Apex team, and exchanged quiet nods. As I passed Cody, I gave him a faint smile. Not smug, just aware. In the hallway outside, Brandon caught up to me, demanding to know what had happened. I stopped and looked at him. I told him I did the work, while he brought a mascot. I walked away, my heels clicking down the corridor, leaving him standing there alone. The presentation was over, but my work was not. We had booked the boardroom for the entire afternoon. What Vanguard assumed would be a post-demo celebration had become a quiet autopsy of their account. I sat at the head of the table, laptop plugged into the projector, with Julian Fletcher beside me. He told me to walk them through the implementation schedule. I did not gloat, I just went to work. I pulled up the schedule. Vanguard had labeled aggressive yet doable. I pointed out that the timeline assumed immediate system access, which had already been denied by their internal security team. The procurement chief swore softly, noting they had lost 2 days on that delay. I nodded and showed them that the contractor Vanguard listed for custom integration was actually an unqualified intern from their offshore partner. The room went silent. Cody was slouching in the corner with a yellow pad, looking defeated. He mumbled that the intern was supervised, but I asked if he had personally reviewed the staging environment before today. He blinked and admitted he had not. I navigated to the staging interface, showing 5 red error banners that had appeared that morning. I noted that no one at Vanguard had caught them because they were not monitoring the system. Julian looked furious. He asked for my recommendation. I advised rebuilding the integration layer with an independent vendor, a small senior-only team I had worked with before. Julian agreed immediately, redirecting another phase of the project away from Vanguard. Next, I reviewed the procurement workflow. I had written the original specification, but Vanguard's implementation used hard-coded values that would fail under international vendors. I suggested scrapping that section and reverting to the March draft. For 2 hours, I methodically dismantled Vanguard's presence, replacing their sloppy work with solid plans, timelines, and contacts. Cody wilted with every bullet point. Brandon Cobb texted me 3 times during the meeting, begging to debrief and asking if I was okay. I did not reply. They did not realize that the room they booked, the meeting they thought was theirs, had become a surgical theater where I was removing their influence. Julian looked at me and asked why they had not hired me 6 months ago. I replied that I was buried under people who knew how to talk louder than me. He smiled and said that was no longer the case. By the time the meeting wrapped, contracts had been reallocated, scopes rewritten, and ownership transferred, quietly and precisely. Vanguard still thought they were in the follow-up phase. They had not seen the emails being drafted or the access rights being revoked. At exactly 6:12 in the evening, Vanguard's Slack server pinged in a panic. Brandon's status flipped to active. followed by a message asking if anyone had feedback from the presentation. No one answered. The client had already removed Vanguard's admin access. I received my first email from Brandon at 6:24, asking to align on expectations and suggesting a call. I did not respond. At 6:37, another email came from the regional operations director, claiming there was confusion about vendor assignments. I smirked. Then a message from human resources, suggesting a chat about reintegrating my expertise. Reintegrate, like I was a rogue software update. My phone buzzed with calls from Cody and Brandon. I let them ring. At 7:18, I opened my inbox and replied to legal's inquiry about a potential conflict of interest. I wrote that I was unavailable for internal calls and instructed them to direct all further communication to my attorney. I hit send, leaned back, and breathed. The panic belonged to them now, to the executives who copied my formatting but not my strategy, and the system that told me I was not leadership material. I had built my own table and brought the client with me. Brandon sent a final text asking if I was really doing this. I replied that I already had. The email hit inboxes the next morning. Julian Fletcher announced that my consultancy, Vance Strategy Solutions, had been engaged as the primary consultant, effective immediately. No mention of Vanguard. Within 10 minutes, internal Slack threads leaked. Employees were panicking about losing the account, and Brandon was reportedly yelling in his office. Meanwhile, I was walking into the client's new co-working suite. Bright windows, fresh coffee, and my own desk. An intern greeted me with a gift basket and a note from Julian. "Glad you walked in. We should have called you months ago." I unpacked my laptop, a small quote my sister, Clara Vance, gave me years ago. "Build what they said you could not," and a flash drive containing my old files and backups. I opened the drive, looked at the folder titled Contingency, and deleted it. The system asked if I was sure. I clicked yes, extinguishing the last link to Vanguard. I created a new folder named Client Onboarding Week 1. I was no longer fixing other people's fires. I was building my own road. The invoice went out at 7 in the morning. Vance Strategy Solutions, invoice number 1. Total due, $42,800. Paid in full 3 minutes later. I sent a final text to Brandon Cobb. "Thanks for the presentation invite. It went great." I turned my phone over and let the silence carry it away. Elsewhere, Cody was packing his desk and Vanguard's channels were quiet. I was stepping into my new office. Exposed brick, good light, and a folder of other clients who were tired of being taken for granted. I did not need to burn bridges. I had already built the road.